you the strength you place in the fire. We ask you for patience. You pound the sin, you forge, you baptize with your spirit. Our tension strength goes high. We come forth with fruit from the forge.
Hey, welcome, the Sunday Forge. Glad to have another chance at answering some of your questions. With me today, you know Scott Frisbie. So Scott is kind of regular now. Yeah, you're just part of this. Mm-hmm. And with us also, my friend Bryce, McFadden, that's it? Yeah, my good friend whose name I can't remember. We go way back.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah. Glad you wandered around today. Anyway, glad you're with us, Bryce. So we have a number of interesting questions today. I've called them early creation questions, and we have 4 of them. No, I think we have 5. Yeah. We'll see what we can get through. I think we can get through all 5 of them. Again, we aren't going to go into super depth of them. We aren't, going to pick these apart, but we're going to give the general. Here's where we camp. Here's where we lean. So, let me start with these questions, guys. Question 1: in Genesis 6:2-4, who are the sons of God in this passage? Are the sons of God still having sexual relations with women? So I have no idea why I agreed to take this question. Let me read Genesis 6:1-4. When human beings began to increase in number on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, "My spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years." The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. So we have a number of things going on with that, and there are a lot of theories about these Nephilim. So Bryce, kind of start us out with that.
Yeah, I think some of the popular theories are the Nephilim are some superhuman kind of being with incredible powers. Some would think maybe they're of origin, maybe demonic / human hybrid creatures, or fallen angels, or something like that. So
Yeah,
a little out there.
Yeah. Scott likes the alien theory.
Yeah, giant monsters from outer space. Yeah.
So bring us to. Yeah, I mean, those are all theories that are out there, and some of them are pretty wild.
Yeah, it's on Instagram. They got great graphics for those.
Well, there we go.
It got to be impressive,
Sons of God, daughters of men. What are we talking about here?
Yeah, you sort of, the one thing is like we've got like Nephilim, which is a word that isn't used all that often in Scripture. We've got like 2 instances, and that's why they didn't translate it. They just left it as Nephilim. They left the Hebrew. But yeah, I mean, a lot of times it's, the fallen ones or ones who caused to fall. Because it's kind of got this mysterious thing, everybody trying to fill in the blanks, it's like, oh, what could this be?
Right.
And, and it doesn't help that later on when you start getting, to be mentioned with scriptures, that you start getting into the Vulgate and the Septuagint stuff where they translated the word as giants. It doesn't help the case.
Right.
But it's like these fallen ones, or ones that caused the fall. And for me, I look at the thing as like, I guess you're going to kind of go with the rabbinic thing where you've got Cain's line of people, and you've got this murderer with his descendants, and we've got Seth, the godly line, and it's kind of thing with the sons of man and the daughters of God, or
sons of God,
the 2 lines were, mixing. You know, like the godly line was marrying the ungodly.
So you're saying the sons of God are people, they're human beings,
I'd say people, yeah.
and they're of the godly line of
Seth.
Seth.
Yeah.
Seth. And Bryce, so that then the daughters of men are the ungodly line from Cain.
Right, right. And if you keep it all in context, it really makes sense. You go into Genesis 4, you're seeing Cain's line. You go into Genesis 5, you're seeing Seth's line. And then we wind up with the situation that we have in Genesis 6. And you definitely see the characters in the lineage. You see the godliness in the one line, and you see the ungodliness in the other line. It makes sense when you walk into Genesis 6.
Right. Right. Just to help that along a little bit, Genesis 4:26, at that time people began to call on the name of the Lord. And then it starts into, this is the account of Adam's line, and it goes into the godly line. And of course, what we need to know, I think, is Scripture isn't a history book.
Yeah.
It's a redemptive history book.
Yeah.
Here's the way God brought about redemption history through people and through lines of people.
And it's broad strokes. It's not
Yes.
every single little thing going on.
Right, right. Interesting, Genesis 5:3, Adam lived 130 years. When he had lived 130 years, he had his son in his own likeness, in his own image, whom he named Seth. So that verbiage of in his own image, God created us in his own image. And it's not just, hey, he looks like me, but he acts like me. And so there's that image of Adam, of the godly line, which was Seth. And we would say, I think, Cain was not of the image of Adam in that sense.
Yeah, definitely kind of a corrupted image.
Right, right. I don't know, do we need to talk a little bit more about, sons of God? Because, sons of God, the phrase sons of God, Beni Elohim, is mentioned in Job. But in Job, it's always angels.
Yeah.
And so, but the context of Job is in the throne room of God. The context here is not the throne room of God. And so in Scripture, sons of God can be angels or they can just be human beings. And it depends on context a lot of times.
And again, it's one of those things where it's not real popular. It's not 500 uses. And again,
True enough.
When people, look at Job. This must be it,
Yes.
And again, they said it's context, and people trying to grab things out of context and shove them.
Right, right. Yeah, and Psalm 89 talks about, it uses, you are all called gods.
Yeah.
So, God's sons of gods often was referring to rulers, human rulers too. So there's lots of, well, not lots, but I think there's context enough to say, yes, this certainly can be human beings and doesn't have to be angels.
Yeah. I think of Matthew 5:9, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. So you see another application right there.
Yeah.
So it falls really within the legitimate boundaries of what this word can be used for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's all in the context. And
So we're saying then we're gonna land on the sons of God are not angels, they're not aliens, they're not demons, they're not superhumans, they're actually people.
Yeah.
And daughters of men obviously are people. So people would, then the counter was saying, well, what about the Nephilim? I mean, they got to be some sort of superhuman creature, so that the sons of God had to be angels to create giants.
Yeah.
And of course, it is unfortunate that Nephilim, how you got giants out of it is just
Kind of a bad translation.
probably a bad translation because you didn't know what to do with Nephilim.
Yeah.
But I don't think it has anything to do with superhuman abilities.
No, I mean, there's stuff like in Jubilees and Enoch where they talk about the Nephilim being these like 300-foot tall characters and stuff, destroying mankind.
Right.
But that's why the church said, no, this is not Scripture.
Right.
This is too ridiculous.
Yes.
And but we've got like that. But looking at the New Testament, just kind of looking at a similar thing where Paul is saying, don't be yoked with unbelievers. You know, if you've got, if you have relationships with an unbeliever, you're not going to have giant kids. That's not how the NFL came about.
Right.
And
Right.
it's like,
Yeah, that's a very good point because the answer back is but giants were created, so it had to be. They don't come from regular people, but even Guinness World Book of Record, I think the tallest guy was 9'2" or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, he wasn't. He didn't have a demon father or
Right.
mother or something. And men of renown. David had men of renown.
yeah.
One of David's mighty men fought a guy who was scripture in First Chronicles. I was just reading it. Was 7'6", and said he snatched the spear away from his hand and killed him with his own spear. I mean, to be a mighty man or a man of renown doesn't mean you're superhuman.
Right. Yeah.
And so one of the other things too, sometimes, local little kings were revered as gods. A lot of times we see like, the pharaohs being revered as gods. We've got like a lot of local little kings
Right.
and stuff, but that maybe they've caused this people in their town, okay, I'm your god now,
Right.
and I'm going to protect you because I got voted this job because I'm the biggest, baddest guy in town.
Right.
And
Right.
yeah,
And that has application with David, and we'll wrap this one up. We're almost done with this question, I think. But, David was out there, a giant,
yeah,
right? I said David. Goliath was out there.
Goliath, yeah.
And David comes along and says, hold on a second. That guy's no God.
yeah,
That guy is not superhuman.
yeah.
Our God is really God, so I'm gonna show people that. And David was really the man of renown, not Goliath.
Yeah.
In that instance.
Yeah.
So I think we take that phrase "men of renown" and think, oh, they must be super special because of their height or strength or what they can weight lift or something.
And that's kind of how Saul got to be king, because he was the big, muscular
He
guy.
was a tall,
He was the big guy, you know.
that's
and,
true.
well, that guy's going to be our
true.
king.
Yeah. So I think we could conclude by saying, at least in our opinion, and I think most people's opinion, most good theology, let me put it that way.
Everybody off of Instagram.
Yeah. There's not angels that came down and had sex with women. And we didn't mention
It's true. Good point.
that one.
Yeah, I mean, angels really are not sexual beings. In fact, the question about is there going to be marriage in heaven, it says in Mark 12 that we'll be like the angels, neither marrying nor given in marriage. And so we don't really have any scriptural precedents to say that angels would have sexual relations at all.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah. Jesus indicates the opposite.
yeah.
So it wouldn't make sense then to, Jesus just says that and then we say, oh no, but he got it kind of wrong and this was before his time, so he really didn't know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's where we go. Jesus has the final word. If Jesus says something, okay, that's where the argument stops.
Right. So sons of God, daughters of men are all human.
Yeah.
Sons of God are those of the godly line from Seth, from Adam to Seth. Daughters of men are the ungodly line of Cain. And it's not that they created giants because one was superhuman. We don't know they created giants, but the Nephilim, there was some sort of renown that they had or some sort of abilities or whatever. But, I mean, genetics does that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so good. Let's move on to question 2. Question 2 is about a guy named Melchizedek. In Genesis 14, 18 through 20, who is Melchizedek? Why is he important to this passage? Where is Salem? Why are we learning about Melchizedek and Salem here in this passage, and what's our takeaway? So, talk about Salem a little bit, or Melchizedek, king of Salem.
We want to go through it's a short passage.
Yeah, go ahead and read that.
Yeah,
Sure,
it said,
sure.
in Genesis 14, then Melchizedek, this is after Abraham goes and rescues Lot from the kings of Sodom, and all of them come along and rescued Lot. It said, Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of the God Most High, and he blessed Abram, saying, Blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, and praise be to God Most High, who delivered your enemies into your hand. And then Abram gave him 1/10 of everything. It was like, this is guy appears out of nowhere,
Yeah.
and Abraham, gives him a tenth of everything. It's like, because he's priest of the God Most High. So that's okay. It's guy who's the same God that Abraham is following.
Right. Right.
And it's like, okay, this is thing, and it is an odd passage. It's like this guy, like he shows up out of nowhere, and we look at Salem, the town, probably Jerusalem. I'm guessing,
Right.
That seemed to be the
Salem
most
means peace, right?
peace means
Yeah.
peace, yeah, and
And Jerusalem means Jerusalem, belonging to peace.
yeah, and probably the big exposition comes in the book of Hebrews. We got a couple of chapters there.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
kind of viewing Christ in this light.
Yeah, yeah. Let's get there. I want to say first that Melchizedek, just so people know, means king of righteousness. Meli is
Meli,
king,
yeah.
and Zedek is righteousness. So
Yeah.
he's the king of righteousness from the place of. So he's also called the king of peace because he's from Salem. So that's the connection there, and of course that leads us into connections with Christ, being the king of righteousness and the king of peace, prince of peace. So.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about, are we ready to jump into Hebrews, or do you have...
Well, I was going to say, it's when you look at it, probably the two most popular ways of looking is to ask the question, is this literal or figurative? It's a real person
Yeah.
in the book of Genesis. Obviously, it winds up quite mysterious
Yeah.
because we don't have a lot of history. We have a few short verses.
Right.
Yeah.
But the connection with Jesus is pretty incredible. You could go, well, is this an Old Testament appearance of Christ, Christophany, or is this more typology? Is there a point to be made using Melchizedek to point to something about Jesus?
Right.
That's where I'd walk into the book of Hebrews.
Okay. Yeah. So typology kind of sets it up for the coming of Christ, and
Yeah.
we can reflect back and go, oh yeah, I see how that makes sense.
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Well, so I've seen people say, oh, this was actually Christ. It's like, you guys start getting all sorts of problems if you've got Christ being incarnate before the incarnation and stuff. Is like, saying this is a guy who's this kind of a pattern for Christ. This guy is setting the image. The typology is what we're looking at. I think, and Hebrews definitely brings that for it.
Yeah, yeah. Let me take us into Hebrews.
All right.
Hebrews 5. I'm going to read 5 through 10. In the same way, Christ did not take on himself the glory of becoming a high priest, but God said to him, "You are my son. Today I have become your father." And he says in another place, "You are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek." So during the days on Jesus' life on earth, he offered up prayers and petitions with fervent cries and tears to the one who could save him from death, and it was heard because of his reverent submission. I guess I'll finish that. Verse 8, son though he was, he learned obedience from what he suffered, and once made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation for all who obey him, and was designated by God to be high priest in the order of Melchizedek. So, king of righteousness, king of peace. He was a priest of God before the covenant, before the Levites were to be priests.
Before he was the priest, before the priesthood got started.
Right, right. You wrote some interesting things in your notes about that. You want to discuss that a little bit, or?
Well, yes, so one of the odd things that kind of stands out is that when Melchizedek comes out, he says, he brings bread and wine. It's like, it's kind of an odd thing to be, look, back then everybody was sacrificing goats. I mean, he's coming out to meet Abram, who's victory and all this stuff. And you think, oh, let's offer up a sacrifice to our God. And it's like, he's got bread and wine. You think, where's the calf? Aren't we supposed to be doing a calf or a lamb or something?
Right, yeah.
And, that was it's really an odd thing for them. At least it comes across odd to us anyway.
Sure.
That he came out with bread and wine, and then we look at, Jesus with the bread and wine and the new covenant.
Right.
And, but yeah, it's the whole thing with the timing that, here is Abram, making his sacrifices to this priest before there's a normal priesthood set up.
Right.
It won't be set up for hundreds of years.
Right.
And and then the whole in Hebrews it goes on and say, hey, that's why, and this is the person that Christ is like, who is
Yes.
beyond the priesthood.
He's
before
a priest forever.
Yeah, he's the priest forever. He's the priest, from the beginning, to the end.
Not dependent upon the Mosaic covenant.
Yeah, or just
Not
dependent
just
on the
Israel's
temple or
priest.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I remember a few things that you might have to say that are
Yeah,
good.
I think what persuades me a little bit is when I look into Hebrews and go, what's the intent the author of Hebrews was trying to point to is the superiority of the priesthood of Jesus over the Levitical system. And here you have, Jesus wasn't even in the Levitical line. He's from the tribe of Judah.
Yeah.
And then you have Melchizedek. And really, I think the emphasis really is on Jesus.
Yes.
And the superiority of a priesthood that is eternal, a priesthood where you're no longer offering sacrifices, but it's been finalized in his death, burial, and resurrection in Jesus himself. Far superior. And to think that the Levitical priesthood only was good for the Israelite people.
Right.
And Jesus, his priesthood is good for every tribe, tongue, and nation,
Yes.
and good for all eternity.
Yeah.
All eternity.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, let me just read the last few verses of Hebrews 7, 26 through 28. Such a high priest truly meets our need, one who is holy, blameless, pure, set apart from sinners, exalted above the heavens. Unlike the other high priests, he does not need to offer sacrifices day after day, first for his own sins and then for the sins of the people. He sacrificed for their sins once for all when he offered himself. For the law appoints as high priests men in all their weakness, but the oath, which came after the law, appointed the Son, who has been made perfect forever. So it's just exactly what you said there. Jesus is our forever priest. No more sacrificial system we don't have to keep anymore. Jesus paid that penalty, made the sacrifice. So, what did we just say? Bring that to a conclusion for me, would you, Scott?
Yeah.
Well, I just was thinking that, among the Israelites, the whole thing is Father Abraham. He's the one who started everything.
Right.
He was the one that God made the promise and the covenant, of that there would be a nation.
Yeah.
And here is this person worshiping God Most High through this, mysterious figure that we don't know about.
Right.
But, it's one of those things saying, hey, this is, beyond what our nation has done. It's for all people.
Yeah.
And that's, I said, the superiority of Christ as our priest.
Right.
Is,
Right. And not coming from law,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
coming from grace.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good, good. So what's the takeaway? I think the takeaway is that our salvation is based on one who's greater than one nation, one covenant. It's an eternal sacrifice, an eternal priesthood. We're eternally, if I can say, eternally secure in Christ.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, there was like one thing, I don't know if I'm trying to think if it was part of the question, like, how does Melchizedek fit into the story? It's like, okay, we've got this thing where there's been this big war, he's rescued Lot, there's booty and plunder and all sorts of riches, and, he comes out and he's got the stuff, and, King of Sodom says, you can have all this stuff, just give me the people.
Right.
I want a workforce, And, Abram says, no, I'm not going to let anybody say that you made me rich.
Right. Don't want to be associated with you.
Don't want to be associated with the king of Sodom.
Right.
And he said, just, my guys, they can have what they're owed, but I don't want your stuff.
Right.
And, then he, gives the stuff to, he's just totally honoring God and making sure he's got that break, and this, maybe Melchizedek showed up to say, this could be a really tempting situation, and, looking, God, you're not going to be tempted beyond where you can handle, that God intervenes in this situation for Abram,
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, Melchizedek is in a way the opposite of the king of Sodom.
Yeah.
right? The king of Sodom. It's kind of like our first question. The king of Sodom really represents the ungodly line of people, sort of thing, that aren't following God. And Melchizedek, king of righteousness, king of peace, represents the godly line. And Abraham says, no, I don't want anything to do with the ungodliness, but I will worship and serve the true God. So that's good takeaway. So thank you for that, Scott. Let's move on to our third question. The Bible introduces us to Adam and Eve and their sons, Cain and Abel. However, after Cain commits fratricide, which just means he killed his brother, he moves to the land of Nod, and suddenly he has a wife. Now this raises the intriguing question. I wouldn't agree that it's all that intriguing, honestly, but who was Cain's wife? It's not, anyway, if Adam and Eve were the first humans, then Cain and Abel were the only offspring at the time. Where did this mystery woman come from? Again, let's start by saying the Bible's not a history book. God wasn't interested in, here's the names of every single person who lived, and here's what they did, and here's how they're connected, and I want you to know everything there is to know. It's a book about redemptive history. And again, we have the godly line. Redemption comes through the godly line of Adam and Seth, through Seth, and not through the ungodly line of Adam and Cain. So let's set that as our foundation to know what we're talking about. But let's answer this. Where did he get a wife from?
Well, I think the first thing is the probably a mistaken premise that they were the only offspring.
Yes.
You know, I mean, they were told to be fruitful and multiply. You know,
That was a command they obeyed.
Right. Yes, they got that one right.
They weren't quite the nuclear family wasn't the goal at the time.
Right. Well, that's true. That's interesting because we kind of view it through our culture, and like the nuclear family of 2 children is enough. Right.
And they were living hundreds of years, which means a lot of offspring.
A lot. Yes, exactly. So that's a good point. That's a false premise to say that they only had 2 kids, so where'd the other come from? So, by the way, Genesis 5:3-5 tells us, I'm not there, but tells us that Adam and Eve had other children. After he begot Seth, the days of Adam were 800 years, and he had sons and daughters. So clearly, Adam and Eve had other sons and daughters. So let's answer this. He has a wife. Where did the wife come from?
Oh, a sister.
Sister.
Is obnoxious as that sounds to our modern sensibilities.
Sure.
You know, I mean, I've seen a thing where they talk about, you know, at that point, the genetics were pure because they just created.
Right. Less effects of sin.
And as you know, and as the generations go along, you start seeing more of the things come along where you don't go marrying near relatives anymore.
Right.
You know, because of all the problems you get with that.
Right.
You know, that's the one main explanation I've heard about that.
Well, when you're created perfect with perfect DNA, there isn't the aberrations that take place.
But I mean, there's all sorts of weird theories about the sisters and the stuff like that. But,
let's not get into that just for sake of time.
That's the Instagram stuff.
But I mean, even Cain knew there were other people in the earth. Right? Because in Genesis 4:14 and 15, you know, he says to God, "Today you're driving me from the land. I'll be hidden from your presence. I'll be a restless wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me." So Cain recognizes that it's not only he and his brother and his parents. I mean, he knows there's other people in the world. And we don't know how old he is at that time. We don't know how many. It could be 200 years have gone by, and so Adam and Eve had, 200 children. It's not It's not inconceivable to think that.
Well, even if he's only in his 40s, there's
you can have a child every year. I mean,
And you think of Abel's lineage too. If he's worried about vengeance, I mean, there are generations that could carry that grudge. So he's legitimately worried.
That's right. It's not just some sort of vain thing. But there's a legitimate worry there. So yes, there were other people. What's the problem if we say that God created Adam and Eve, and then over here, God created someone else? What's the problem with that? Because that's the way some people answer the question. Well, God created 3 or 4 sets of people,
Yeah.
and we only know about Adam and Eve. What?
Yeah.
I mean, he created, I think I used, Aiden and Evelyn. What's the problem with that?
Well, then you wonder, okay, how do these guys rank higher to pass sin on to the rest of the world than these guys over here?
Right.
You know.
If it's only Adam and Eve that
Yeah.
sinned, maybe we have a few lines of people who've never sinned.
Yeah.
And then you start getting into the whole weird...
Yeah, you start really creating some constructs that have no biblical basis whatsoever. In fact, if anything, the scriptures will come back and say, 1 Corinthians 15:45, Adam was the first man. Back in Genesis 3:20, Eve was the mother of all living.
Oh, there you go.
And so,
Yeah.
it kind of shuts down the argument that there are people outside that, outside of the lineage of Adam and Eve. We're all from Adam and Eve. We're related, by the way.
Oh, man.
That explains a lot.
I need a moment or two.
Yeah. Well, I'm expecting a Christmas card.
Didn't you get my one last year? I put it in the mail.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, there are no other created... I'm glad you mentioned that Adam was the first man and Eve was the mother of all people.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, they had other sons and daughters and lots of children.
Didn't have a whole lot of birth control back then.
No, there weren't a lot of methods. Apparently none.
No.
So yes, he would have married a sister or cousin, or well, it would have been. Yeah, I mean,
Could have been a niece. I
could
mean,
have been, yeah.
you can go
Yeah.
far
That's
down
right.
the line, really, because
That's
you're
true.
talking hundreds of years.
that's right.
You got a lot of choices.
Yes, that's true. That's very true.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So what about the polygamy?
yeah.
That becomes an issue in this discussion.
It does become an
Because
issue.
people go, wait a minute.
Cain
Doesn't
took
God
2
say you
wives.
can't,
Right.
marry a relative?
Right.
So how would you respond to that?
I don't know, Bryce. Why would you bring that up?
Because I'm curious.
Okay.
And I think there's a good answer,
Are
though.
you sure you're
I think
related
you've
to
got. I think you've got the answer.
I'm going to give that to Scott.
No, I'm not touching that one. No.
Well, then it falls
Sounds like
to you.
a show on one of the networks there.
Right. Well, it is interesting that Cain is the one who takes 2 wives, and Cain is from the ungodly line. So, I mean, he's already disobeyed God with, making the wrong sacrifice.
Yeah.
God says, I've told you how to make the right sacrifice. Just go ahead and do it. And he doesn't. And then he kills his brother, and God says, what are you doing? So Cain doesn't really care too much about God.
Yeah.
So he takes a couple of wives, and he's headed down that ungodly line.
Yeah. It's interesting because it wasn't really until 400 years later, in the time of Moses, that the word of the Lord was, do not marry a close relative. But you got to think, by that time, there were such a huge population of people
Yes.
that there was no necessity to marry a close relative
Right.
at all.
Right.
But really, that didn't really come into play until 400 years later.
Right. Right.
So.
Again, I think it's that progression of sin in the world and how it taints the gene pool and
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You didn't really have, as far as we know, I mean, there weren't the sicknesses and diseases that we have today. I mean, every year I think we get a new disease or a new sickness or, oh, I've never seen that before. And it's just that the cumulative effects of sin in general in the world. And
Mutations and all that.
Yeah, and it's as if God might have known that and said,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
we're not going to do that anymore. You came out of Egypt with 1 million plus people, so there's plenty of people to choose from,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay,
Moving right
moving
along.
right along. Moving right along. Question 4, and I mean, these questions aren't terribly mysterious in the sense that there's no answer to them. It's just that they can get bogged down in crazy theologies and arguments that.
There's a lot of fancy rationale for a lot of this
Yes,
that you can get
yes.
lost in the weeds easily.
Well, and we know, the world loves the entertainment value of great stories rather than
Oh,
truth sometimes.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the truth, that sounds too boring. Couldn't you make it more exciting? It's got to be something else.
Yeah.
You know, like the flood, Noah, the movie that came out, Noah and the rock people,
Oh, yeah.
as if they were the Nephilim or something like that, right?
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Yeah.
and people are like, well, that's a better story. I like that.
Yeah.
Well, there were no rock people.
Yeah.
So don't believe everything you see on TV.
There's some stuff on Instagram where they said these giants got turned into mountains. And they find
Really?
mountains that kind of look like people laying down, but
The sleeping giant in Montana.
Oh, there you go.
yeah,
There
they
you
get
go.
that. Yeah.
Uh-huh. What about the Traveler here in
Yeah, that's probably
on the Olympics?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's just get into that instead of
Oh
question
yeah.
4.
Hey.
So, okay,
Get
question
them
4.
ratings up.
Right, question 4. Genesis 9:13 through 16 talks about the rainbow being a covenant between God and not only humans, but all creatures on earth. What does this mean exactly? And I think the intent of the question is, you know, this isn't just between God and humanity. This is between God and all creation, between God and animals, God and plants, God and everything He's created. So what's the deal with that? What does that mean, that God's promises to all of creation?
Should I read this passage?
Oh, yeah,
You
that's a
good?
great idea.
Okay,
Yeah.
Genesis 9:12 to 17. And God said, "This is the sign of the covenant I am making between you and every living creature with you, a covenant between me and the earth. Whenever I bring clouds over the earth and the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and all living creatures of every kind. Never again will the waters become a flood to destroy all life. Whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures of every kind on earth."
Yeah. So God makes this covenant with His creation, not just with us, because we are part of creation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there wasn't just humans on the ark.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And of course, we didn't need to put plants on the ark because they would just, there's seeds enough,
Their
they would
seeds were
grow
floating
again.
around,
And
yeah.
fish, well, they were pretty pleased. Like, whoo, hey, no boundaries. Let's check
Right.
this out.
Yeah, the map changed.
Yeah. I never used to be able to go over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, Romans 8, 19 through 22 talks about creation waiting to be redeemed. Let me turn there. Romans 8, 19 through 22. For the creation awaits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. For the creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that creation itself would be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the freedom and glory of the children of God. We know the whole creation has been groaning as in the pains of childbirth right up to the present time. So, yeah, we're part of creation. Not that we are brothers and sisters to trees and plants, or, you know, our cousins are the fish, or,
Yeah.
you know, anything like that. We are separate creations, but we're part of creation. And God's got a plan for all of creation, and He's going to recreate the heavens and the earth. So, Jesus died on the cross to redeem creation. Right? Can I say that? Does that sound too theologically risky?
I think His plan is pretty complete. You see in the end times, there will be a new heaven and a new earth.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I think
Yeah.
you could say that.
Yeah. I mean, not that animals or plants need to receive Jesus as Lord and
Right,
Savior.
right.
He is their creator, just like He's our creator.
Yeah.
I mean,
But we're the
man
ones
is
who
supposed to rule
subjected.
over this creation.
Yeah, and as rulers, as lords over creation, we're the one who subjected all creation to Satan's rulership, really.
Yeah.
And so Jesus is the kinsman redeemer, right? We get that idea from the book of Ruth, the kinsman redeemer, where the kinsman redeemer can buy back land that had been sold or given away because they couldn't keep it or whatever it is. And the kinsman redeemer says, I will buy it back at whatever cost it is. And Jesus gives his own life and buys back all of creation. And he redeems it. And so Satan is no longer has authority over it. Satan no longer has capture over it.
He can't say mine.
Right, right. So all of creation is important to God. Yeah, and I don't want to slip into, that whole thing of where, like I said before, the trees are my brothers, and
Right.
the animals are my cousins, and we're all one. Well, we're not all one. Yeah. We are different creations.
Yeah.
Well, you don't want to worship creation. Some people say,
Right.
the trees are God, and
Yeah.
God created all this stuff. But it reflects God, but it's not
Yeah.
God.
Right.
Yeah. I think even the rainbow itself is a reflection of God because it's his promise, it's his covenant, and it's a reminder of his faithfulness, really,
Yes.
to all creation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the restoration even of creation is an aspect of his faithfulness.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. It's interesting to me. I'll just risk a little bit more conversation on this question, but it's interesting to me that the rainbow, the picture of the rainbow, and then when you get to Genesis, the description of the throne room is a rainbow of all these colors surrounding God. There's colors and there's sounds and there's this just overwhelming sensory description of who God is, and so it's
God of light and all that.
Yeah. So that's just an interesting. I like to connect the very beginning of creation with the end. And we know that creation is coming to an end. Peter tells us not by flood, not by water, but by fire, and then Christ will come and create a new heaven and earth, and there will be absolutely no sin or darkness or anything we need to worry about.
So when we get these long rainstorms here in the Pacific Northwest, you don't see all the animals starting to gather in the Home Depot parking lot.
Right. We're not gonna. Yeah.
Don't need to build an ark.
We might feel like we should build an ark sometimes, but we don't need to. Look for the rainbow. Question 5, last question. And I think it's a pretty simple one to answer. Colossians 1:16. Does this mean that Jesus created everything and it was all for him? Can you read Colossians 1:15 through 17?
It says this, he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For by him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things were created by him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together.
So, how do we answer this question? Does this mean Jesus created everything and it was all for him? Go ahead.
I looked at one thing. It was one of the odd points. We look at creation, and out of the Trinity, we see Jesus is like the one who took on physical form, and maybe there's a little separate, different kind of relationship, But it's, for him, it's like he's the firstborn. He's the heir.
He's the creator. All creation reflects his glory.
Yeah.
But it wasn't all for him in the sense of he's being real selfish and go, oh, I really want to have fun with this, and this is just my toy, right?
Yeah. Well, he created everything with a plan and a purpose.
Yeah.
And I'd say as well, being God, he deserves all the glory and all the praise.
But creation is also, this world is for us to enjoy.
Yeah.
I mean, he said to Adam, I give all this to you. Take care of it, enjoy it, it's yours.
And that's a good point, because when Paul is writing to the Colossians, he has in his mind a heresy that he is addressing, Gnosticism, which really had the view that, there's the spiritual, but the material is evil.
Right.
And really, when you see in the description of what Paul is writing there, whether things on earth or things in heaven, things visible, things invisible,
Right.
he's really merging the two.
Yeah.
And he said it's all for the glory of God.
Yeah.
And, it shows me we can enjoy the stuff of this earth
Yes.
in a godly way.
Yeah. Yeah,
We
that's
can.
well put, yeah.
It's good.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah, I think that's important to realize that there's this whole Gnosticism going on, and Paul's really correcting that,
Yeah.
speaking against
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
We get the view that, physical world isn't worth anything. And you start getting the things where, okay, it doesn't, what happens in the physical world doesn't matter. And you start getting all the hedonistic kind of stuff going on, or people trying to go super ascetic, starving themselves, whatever, trying to escape from this physical world.
Yeah.
And God created it, he said, this is good, this is good. It was created good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, it's there for us to enjoy. It's part of what we are. We're going to leave this world behind, and there's going to be a new one
Yeah.
that's better.
Right. Right. Right.
But it's, we can't deny this one.
Right. So there's a sense in which, yes, it's created all for him. There's that sense because he is God. He is a creator. We give him glory. We give him honor. We'll be doing that in eternity. So, yes, of course it's for him. But not in a humanistic, selfish way of, I'm just doing this for me and I don't care about anybody else. This is my toy and I'm not going to share it. He created it for us to enjoy.
Yeah.
And he will recreate another heaven and earth, another earth. Heavens and earth, we won't get into that. That's actually a question for next week, I
I
think.
think so.
Yeah, yeah. You want to come back? Don't answer that. Where was I going? Now I just messed myself up. Oh my goodness. Why do I do this? We're going to have a new earth to enjoy. It'll be perfect. It'll be the Garden of Eden. It'll be wonderful.
Yeah. Well, if you were to get the kids a big Lego set,
Yeah.
because you wanted them to enjoy and have this big Lego set.
Yeah.
And, they get the big castle built and it falls apart. And it's, okay, there's a bigger set available.
Right.
We'll kind of put this one back together a little bit. We've got a bigger set coming.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think, it's kind of this creation here, we kind of came in and knocked it apart.
Right. Right.
But it's still there. It's still there to enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not saying creation is Legos, but there is.
Well.
there's-
The pieces just don't fit very well.
yeah,
Right.
pieces don't fit like they used to, and there's some got glued together.
Right. Well, guys, thank you. Thanks for answering those questions. Those are kind of difficult questions in some ways, but not so difficult when we're common sense approach about it. And I appreciate that about you guys. So, thanks for being a common sense guy today.
Because that's unusual.
Well, I was going to say you really held it together. I'm surprised. Thanks for joining us. Man, let me close with this doxology from Paul. It just seems fitting as we're talking about the majesty and mystery of God. Oh, the depth of the riches of the wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable his judgments and his paths beyond tracing out. Who has known the mind of the Lord? Or who has been his counselor? Who has ever given to God that God should repay him? For from him and through him and for him are all things. To him be the glory forever and ever. Amen. Thanks for joining us.